Welcome everybody to today's a special one. Why is that? Because you might have noticed our title is slightly different for today. It's a Knights of Keira stream, which I guess it hasn't been that long because we did Atonement, but it feels like these are fewer and far between. Maybe because we've like covered most of our favorites. But there's still plenty to do, and then ones that we may redo. We were just talking about the timing of one in particular. And welcome if anybody straggles in or watches later. Nice to see you. And I'm feeling well rested today, which is a contrast to how I usually feel on Sundays, because I realized that despite my declarations to the contrary, I had been spending a bit too much time online and on various social media. And so the past 24 to 48 hours, I have been decidedly not on any of that, and I feel so great. It's amazing how like the clouds clear when you do that, and so I'm actually feeling really good. And I spent today preparing for the stream and also sitting down to watch the film. And I always need to be reminded that I start off this movie smiling at all the sort of stylistic and choices and the acting choices, and it starts off with kind of a mischievous afoot, but there's like a joyous quality to the opening of the movie, and then I have to be reminded that this is a tragedy and it's going to end really, really badly. So I always go through a journey with this one in particular. But we are, of course, talking about the 2012 Joe Wright version of Anna Karenina, starring Keira Knightley, Jude Law, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and a slew of other amazing cast members. I have to say right off the bat that there was one appearance by an actor in like a throwaway appearance. He doesn't even really have any lines, but I did the DiCaprio pointing at the screen meme because I saw, oh God, now his Kyle Solar from Andor. I spotted him and I was like, oh my God. Because this is probably the first time I'm watching this movie since I saw Andor. So
this movie, I mean, it's not perhaps the greatest place to start on a conversation, but this movie has a ton of like big name actors in very small roles, including, I completely forgot, a like 2-second cameo from John Bradley as the Austrian prince. That made me do the Leonardo DiCaprio point of the screen because I completely forgot and / missed that the last time.
And I totally like from my very first viewing of this movie, because this was after Game of Thrones had started, and I remember like, because first of all, like I'm not familiar at all with the original Tolstoy novel, nor am I familiar with the other screen adaptations. And so if anybody stumbles onto this stream, this video, who's like a very knowledgeable Tolstoy reader and stuff, they're going to be yelling at me because I'm going to be coming at this completely from the point of view of just loving this film. So when actors show up, I have no idea how big the part is going to be or whatever. And so when I saw John Bradley, I was like, Samwell's in this. And then no, it's like I what does he appear in, like one shot?
Yeah, and it's like through the window of the train, and like it's not even in focus. And the reason I did a double take was because I'm like, hey, that looks like John Bradley. Wait, go back. That is John Bradley.
And so then he appears and then he's gone, and I'm like, oh. But yeah, that's this whole movie. There's all these great actors who I've especially come to recognize a lot of them since this movie has come out. Kitty's father is played by Pip Torrens, who, who was also in Pride and Prejudice, but like I didn't know who he was back then. I didn't know who he is now. Now, of course, I'm very familiar with him because of, if nothing else, The Crown, which he's in like the first couple seasons of, and which, by the way, I think you haven't seen The Crown yet, Jarrett, but he is one of the absolute highlights of the first season or two of that show, because he's basically, the guy, the consigliere of the royal family, where he made sure shit gets done, and you don't want to screw with him. And so, yeah, no, he's a great actor. Let me just, I really do want to pull up the cast list, because even like outside of the, the primary cast. Oh, wait, hold on. That's not going to help me. I pulled up the book. That will definitely not have the cast list. But, okay, here we go. So, yeah, I mentioned Pip Torrens, Holiday Granger, Cara Delevingne, Bill Skarsgård, apparently. Yeah, we mentioned John Bradley, Michelle Dockery, Emily Watson, Ruth Wilson, Olivia Williams, and then we start getting into the main cast, which includes Keira Knightley, Jude Law, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Matthew Macfadyen, Kelly Macdonald, Alicia Vikander, and Domhnall Gleeson. Like, this film's cast is to die for.
It is very much a who's who of British thespians playing, playing Russian princes and princesses and other royal attaches. I'll just throw in also on there Shirley Henderson, who I know is the voice of and puppeteer of Babu Frick, but is also Moaning Myrtle in the Harry Potter movies.
Yes, that's right.
And Emerald Fennell, who most people probably know more as a writer-director of movies like Promising Young Woman, but she has a cameo in this as well. I have not seen The Crown, but I am a Downton Abbey devotee, so I was very happy to see Michelle Dockery, because I adore Lady Mary. She is very much my queen on that show. But obviously the headliners are, as you mentioned, Jude Law, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Matthew Macfadyen, Kelly Macdonald, Alicia Vikander, who is lovely in this, perhaps eclipsed only by the loveliest of them all, Keira Knightley.
Yeah, and which, by the way, when I was doing the collecting the pictures for today's stream, like, I had to do 2 passes. Like, first, just to stay objective, I was getting all the pictures I needed of non-Keira cast members. And then it was like, okay, now I've got like a choice of like 70 images of Keira from this movie. How do I whittle that down to a manageable amount?
with great difficulty, because she looks ravishing in this movie.
Yeah, it's like just out of this world. This movie won Best Costume Design, and Keira just looked absolutely astonishing throughout the film, and it's just like, we've got our pick of images that we can pop up, just looking absolutely breathtaking. So I stay on point, John.
The over under for number of John's size on this stream is good. It's high. It's very high.
Yeah, but hi, Mother Roy, and great to see you. Yeah, I'm way behind on. I should have read this book by now, but I haven't. As much as I love this movie, I should be wanting to take the deep dive into the book. I just have never been able to find the time, get around to it. I'm actually kind of mad at myself that I never picked up the tie-in version, of the book when the film came out, because you'd think I would have been on that, but I did not, and but I'll get around to reading it at some point. I will say, I'll start off with my experience of seeing this film. I was like chomping at the bit. I just couldn't wait for this movie to come out, because another Joe Wright, Keira Knightley, collaboration. It had been a couple of years since the 1-2 punch of Pride and Prejudice and Atonement, which were really quick, one after the other. And then when this was announced and it was going to be Anna Karenina, I was like, oh God, another sumptuous costume drama, collaboration between the two of them. I'm there. Like, I don't have to be sold on it or anything. And I'm only like, terribly saddened by the fact that we haven't gotten one since then. You figure it's got to happen at some point. But I knew nothing about the project when it was announced, other than what it was. It was going to be an adaptation of Anna Karenina, which I certainly knew of, even if I hadn't ever read the book before. And then as it started getting closer to come out, word came out that there was going to be something very different about this version. And but all people had to go on was a couple quotes from Joe Wright and Keira about the style of the movie, but nobody could quite grasp what exactly they were talking about until the first images and then the trailer of this movie came out, and it was like, oh, it's going to be like this really unique hybrid between cinema and the stage. And that really excited me. I know when the film was eventually released, it had a bit of a mixed reception as far as all that goes. And I think there's some people probably, I heard from a lot of people who were familiar with the book and with previous adaptations say that they kind of felt like the style of the film overcame, the story. But then I looked at it from my point of view, and I'm like, I was not familiar with the story before. So for me, it all felt one and the same. I actually can't really, I'm imagining reading this story or seeing another film and experiencing it as a traditional, period drama, without all the wonderful flourishes of, showing the Russian aristocracy on the stage, and all the cool, the staging of all that, and then making that a break away from that whenever you follow Domhnall Gleeson's character, and he walks away from all of that, and it's just such a unique way of doing a film. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this done for cinema, and so for me, it's just such a unique, beautiful piece of art, and it was my favorite film of 2012. Although, again, like I've said this before, not exactly unbiased. It's like you could make a running joke of, oh, did Keira have a movie out this year? Oh, we know what John's favorite movie is going to be. But I just fell in love with it. I remember I got to see it in the evening. I went out by myself. I'm not sure if it was the very day it came out, but you know, relatively soon after it came out, and I just went to like an evening showing it around like 7 o'clock or something, and you know, a couple people in the theater, not that many, but I just got to sit there and sort of bask in the beauty of the film. And you know, I think it's got this sort of joyous, exuberant quality about it before everything then descends into darkness and tragedy. But when it ends, I still feel so overwhelmed by the beauty of the film. And one of the great things, and I've heard that one of the things that usually doesn't make it into other film versions is the love story between Kitty and Kostya. And for me, that story feels like it's the sort of the cinematic antidote to the tragedy of Anna and Vronsky's story. So I think that's why, like, even when the movie ends and it ends in tragedy, you've also got this feeling of hope at the end of the movie too. So yeah, I've been in love with this movie since I saw it, and yeah, for me, it's a wonderful and worthy third chapter of the Keira Knightley, Joe Wright trilogy. I hope it becomes at least a quadrilogy at some point in the future.
As do I, because the two of them, they work extremely well together. They seem to have a lot of respect and affection for each other as artists and as people. So I think they would do very well, and better that Joe Wright makes more Keira Knightley movies than movies like Pan or something along those lines. Which, although I do think that he's obviously has had other successes as well. The big thing is I went on kind of a journey with this movie. You know, I think because we have talked about it before. You know, when we did one of our big Keira Knightley focus on Keira Knightley streams back in 2000, we covered I think 6 Keira Knightley films. We've now this was the last one that hadn't had its own individual stream, but we did touch on it, and I had mentioned that I had some complicated feelings about the movie at first. I did, but ultimately wound up in a very positive place. And the thing is that ultimately the thing that kind of served as a barrier to entry for me is one of the things that you love most about the movie, which is the style. I had heard, like you, that they would be setting this version on a stage and that it would not be the traditional period piece. So I was prepared for something different. Hey, Laura, that's okay.
Oh,
but I wasn't actually prepared for it in practice, because when the movie started, I didn't see this in theaters. I was at med school at the time. I had to catch up with it in the pre-Oscars, lead up. So I was sitting down to watch it, and in my heart, even though I'd known about the stylistic thing, I was expecting ravishing Keira Knightley period piece set in like opulent Russian palaces and with sweeping vistas like the shots we've gotten used to in Pride and Prejudice and Atonement. And it very quickly becomes clear, I'm unfortunately I'm happy to be doing this stream and not watching my boys get beat down right now. But my Stanford won on Friday. Nebraska lost though. So these are the travails of sports that I know mean little to you, John, but they mean a lot to me.
Which, by the way, like, I just pausing for a second, it will never not crack me up. Like the gulf that most people know exists between us is the the Rise of Skywalker debate, but that's a schism that I can recognize. The one that cracks me up is how much of a sports fan you are, because we are so alike in so many ways, but the sports thing is like this big gigantic chasm. but it cracks me up. It actually makes me really happy because it's just one of those things. But
yeah, it is not an entirely rational thing, but God, I'm hooked on football, basketball, Premier League soccer, the works. But yeah, ultimately, getting back to the movie, which is an interest in the love that we both share. Again, when I first started to watch the movie and had kind of forgotten, even though I knew that it was not going to be like a ravishing, opulent period piece, but a little bit more of like a film stage production, a kind of a hybrid between the two. I was not prepared when it started, and we get in because we open actually with a very we don't open with Anna. We open with her brother, Matthew MacFadyen, Steva, which that was jarring enough for me because I had only primarily knew Matthew MacFadyen as Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice at this point, and he plays a very different character in this movie.
Steva.
And shall we say he's a bit of a cad, and he's more than a little ridiculous, and he's also playing Keira Knightley's brother, which on his brother, which after seeing Keira Knightley and Matthew MacFadyen embody romantic lovers in Pride and Prejudice, seeing them as siblings was interesting, but hey, acting, and they're both great in the role.
Well, I do want to pause for just a second because and this is kind of getting to the heart of like our our difference in opinion, at least initially, of of the style of this movie. I was pretty much sold from the get-go just because I loved this opening, because it's a combination of cinema and stage in a way that you really can't. It couldn't be done one way or the other. It's only possible with this combination of both, where Steve is sitting on the stage, getting his barber is shaving his his beard and mustache, and like it's this unbelievable thing where he just does it in like 3 quick shades. And like that would be impossible on the stage, but it's the stage done through cinema and that sort of cinematic magic, and it just made me smile and laugh, and it's one of those it's a great way to open it, because it definitely sets you up like this is what this film is doing.
Yeah, and again, like I appreciate it more now, but in the beginning, I going in expecting and knowing the story of Anna Karenina, because I do own the book. It's a long book. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make it into this adaptation, but I think they had to strip it down and focused on the core, which is the love story. And the big thing was Anna Karenina is not necessarily known as a comedy. It is very much more of a tragedy. But the opening of this movie is quite comedic, and also that combined with the style of it had it be kind of off balance, because when we're opening with seeing Matthew MacFadyen, Steva, basically sneaking around and trying to so he can have a little bit of an affair with the governess and cheat on his lovely wife Kelly Macdonald, and then it ends up and it's revealed in the moment when she comes back and he gives this sudden gasp in the air, and I was like, what? Because that was it's like now I laugh at it because it's such an over the top choice and he's such an over the top character, but that was not how I was expecting the movie to open. And then we immediately start moving in and seeing like stagehands basically moving desks and chairs and backgrounds around. And again, that was something I was not necessarily prepared for. And I was honest in being like, I don't know if I like this choice. And in fact, as it became more and more overt, I actually, to my shame, I did actually, I remember letting out the audible words, "What the actual fuck is this? What's going on?"
Oh, wow.
But ultimately, I knew that this was a stylistic choice, and I'm like, I'm not sure that this is the stylistic choice I would have gone with, but I trust Joe Wright. He's made 2 movies I love. Let me stick with it. And I'm very glad I did, because ultimately what drew me into this movie and why I love it is the story and the ultimate expression of, it is a movie about love in so many ways, tragic love and beautiful, sweet, innocent love, the one between Levin, Kostya, and Katerina. And they are very much the heart of the movie to me. You had mentioned that that they were kind of the antidote to Anna and Vronsky's story, and I believe Joe Wright had actually used that term in the behind the scenes. They were really kind of an essential perspective. I cannot imagine this movie without them. It would be almost unbearably bleak without.
Yeah, and I was shocked when I heard that other versions leave them out, or at least significantly cut down on that being a part of the movie. And for me, that's unimaginable. Because so much of their story lifts you up. I'm trying to imagine this particular version without them, and just the sadness and tragedy of the Anna story. And I just can't imagine it.
Yeah, and we'll gush about the performances. I think Domhnall Gleeson is wonderful in this movie, and obviously I'm very much in love with Alicia Vikander. But
this was the first time that I had ever seen Alicia Vikander in anything, and I don't think this was the very first time I had seen Domhnall Gleeson, but this was definitely the performance of his that made me stand up and be like, "Oh, this guy is good." And I've been a fan of his.
I knew him as Bill Weasley from the Harry Potter movies before this. But this is obviously a much bigger role, and he had this and a movie that came out the following year, About Time, which I adore. Where he's also wonderful. That really kind of put him on the radar. Obviously, Alicia Vikander, her big breakout came a few years later with Ex Machina. Which is the movie she should have won the Oscar for, by the way, not the other one that she actually did win the Oscar for that year. I've very much reworked my memory of that, and she absolutely won for Ex Machina. I don't know what you're talking about. It surely helped. The other movie isn't very good. But ultimately, getting back to a movie that is good, which is this movie. They're seeing Levin's opening courting of Katerina, and how it was, how sweet and awkward it is kind of where I really started to get my heart wrapped up in the movie. Obviously, with and we're seeing Anna, and we're meeting her relationship with her son. And I know that Vronsky's coming, and the moment where they first see each other is electric. But ultimately, where the movie got me good, is when and where I actually started to really like and enjoy the stylistic choices is the dance scene. Because Joe Wright does many things well, but if there's one thing that he does absolutely better than anybody else, it's shooting a romantic ball scene between 2 characters who are falling in love, and all the other characters around them disappear. Because he did it in Pride and Prejudice, and he does it in this movie, and they are both great. And that's the moment where I was like, okay, I get what he's doing with this style, the stylistic choice, because the camera work in that scene is extraordinary. And that's where I'm like, all right, you got me, Joe. I'm gonna go with you on this ride. And then, of course, the power and tragedy of the love story, and the hope of Levin and Katerina's love story ultimately is what really gets the heart into the heart of the movie for me. That
oneer of the dance between Anna and Vronsky, just I can't fit a GIF that long into the Slack, hence why we're not looking at it right now. But that was one of those cinema moments where I was holding in my breath. and just the way it starts wider and then it comes in closer and closer, to the point where then he lifts her up and the camera's on her from underneath, and then she comes down and they're so close to each other. Just like I remember, like, and this is why, like, but it's good getting your initial view of this, because it helps me to understand what the other sort of reaction to this movie was, because I remember coming out of this and recalling moments like that. I'm like, how is everybody not just head over heels in love with this movie? But and it's because those stylistic choices work for some people and they don't work for others. But the thing with you seemed open to letting it kind of wash over you, even if you initially weren't on board with it. And I feel like a lot of people probably didn't keep that open mind as they were watching the movie, because for me, I just, like, moments like that just took my breath away. And yeah, it's so, yeah. I'm just like, there's so many moments like that where I can just, like, gush about it. And I love the way that as they're moving through the crowds, people are frozen in time, and then they start dancing again, and like all that is, like, you can't do this, like, and what, like, in any other form, in because Joe Wright was, he talked about, and he started to do this a little bit with the dialogue in Atonement, but kind of moving away from naturalism, as he calls it. And this was his big swing of doing stuff that is in no way can it be mistaken for reality. This is very, just, it's embracing that space between, like I said, the cinema and the stage, and and the things that a lot of sort of conventions that you can get away with on the stage, because people open themselves up to that sort of heightened reality, but that you don't normally expect in the cinema world, because so often filmmakers are trying to convince you that this is really happening, and not take that more heightened approach. And for me, that was something that I just loved immediately, and I know that for other people it was kind of a bit like, oh, but it just goes to show you that, like, everybody can have such a wildly different reaction to different kinds of cinema. And but I'm glad you did eventually land on appreciating it.
Yeah, and because the thing is, it's Joe Wright clearly wanted to make the movie this way. I think, his background, he had grown up, I think, working at his parents' puppet theater, and so he very much, theater is very important to him, and it's part of his origin story with cinema. I think just for where I stumbled originally was, again, when I think about period pieces, specifically Keira Knightley period pieces, part of the attraction for me is the level of immersion that you get. Like Pride and Prejudice, like from the opening scenes, like I just feel like I'm in that world. Same with Atonement, and many others as well. The Pirates of the Caribbean franchise too, frankly. Even though that's more of a fantasy movie. I liked a lot of times if a movie can just sweep me in and I can feel like I'm lost, like I'm in it. And this movie deliberately withholds that because of the artifice of the stage movement, and the stage hands. Like, and I think that's where I bumped, was I was kind of like, oh, I really want to get lost in this epic love story being told in pre-revolution Russia, and I can't, because I can see that the guy is moving the desk and the stage hands across the screen, and I know, and that is a point that is disrupting my immersion and the sense of realism. And so I was struggling with it. But once I get the point of the idea that like these are people who live very stilted lives and their entire lives are like on a stage, and I could see what Joe Wright was doing with it thematically, and then also the way he was able to use the production to, you know, do some absolutely wonderful camera work. This movie rightly got nominated for Best Cinematography. I started to appreciate it more, and then the power of the story just overwhelmed me. And by the end, I was completely invested, even though there were certain sequences that I'm never going to be as fully immersed in, like for instance the thing like the horse race scene taking place, you know, on the stage as opposed to on an actual horse racing track. It's not a choice I personally will ever love on that front. I have a tendency, a belief that like there will always be a part of me that perhaps wishes we had gotten like a true epic like period piece version of Anna Karenina starring Keira Knightley, but then it wouldn't have been this movie. And ultimately, there's enough in this movie that I just came to truly love, that I started to understand why Joe Wright made the movie this way. And as you said, like you have to go into this with an open heart and an open mind. You know, a lot of people don't approach that with movies. And I frankly think that's where we get a lot of the bad faith criticism that we both despise in the movie going industry. I love this movie now because I did stay open to it. It helped that I trusted Joe Wright and loved Keira Knightley, but ultimately it took time for me, and I'm just glad that I was able to give it that time, because in the end the movie is so worth it.
I will say, like, because on the one hand, I'm very happy to hear you say that, and I'm glad that that Jared kept an open mind about this, and that he feels. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, but my viewing of it was so completely different, and like to me, this is a sumptuous, period epic, and for me, I it didn't require any sort of sort of correcting of my expectations or whatnot. When I see stuff like, I don't know if it's how big a fan of you, how big a fan are you of like stage productions? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, I love the theater. I don't get to go quite as often as I would like, but the thing, I think you kind of touched on it earlier. When you go to the theater, there are certain conventions that you just accept because you have to, because that is the way that plays and stage productions are made. They have to change the background, so you're going to see the stagehands when they change out the sets. You're going to see the wires. You're going to see like people, doing the costume changes and all that stuff. It's part of the experience. And I think where I had kind of, and obviously some of the best stories we've ever gotten are, started on the stage. I think it's just because wasn't used to seeing movies that way, and because I had an idea of what I liked in, certain period pieces, seeing the two blended together was something that I, struggled with initially. And I'm glad that you had a different reaction to it, because it's not an unworthy creative choice at all. It's just something that I had a personal reaction of like, I don't know if this is the way I would have wanted necessarily the story to be told, but the beauty of the movie and the acting and the performances was that ultimately they were strong enough that they led me to see why the movie was being done in this style. And that is so, I kind of feel like, even though we started in different places, we both do love this movie, and it's interesting to have a discussion like this, because as you said, we are often a very similar mind when it comes to movies. This is a case where we had different reactions to something, but ultimately still found common ground. And it didn't even take till the end of my first viewing before I knew I loved the movie. It was just at the initial, when it was finished, I was basically like, I thought that was an incredible story. It is, for that reason, my third favorite of the three Joe Wright, Keira Knightley movies. But God, they're all great. And Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite movies ever. Atonement is a beautiful work of art as well. And this movie has only risen in my estimation every time I've watched it, because it is so, the story is just that powerful. And I now see the benefits of the stage production and the craftsmanship and the camera work being set in this very space that can feel so confined, because that's where the characters are emotionally. And I think that is what has kind of led me to realize that even if I'm not always going to love movies that are done in this style, like Joe Wright is enough of a visionary and Keira Knightley is enough of an artist that they got me through it. And now I see the movie as the work of art that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I like, and I hope you didn't take, what I was saying as me pompously saying, well, I was in love with it this way from the get-go. No. It's just, I find it really interesting just coming to both of those from different places. And it's all the more interesting to talk about just because, with the very nature of this channel, we talk about stuff that we both love. And so usually there aren't that many dividing lines between us in the things that we did talk about. And so it's interesting this in a movie, which we both ultimately arrive at the same place. But as you say, we kind of started in different places. So it's just really interesting to me to sort of, get into the nitty gritty of that. And, but yeah, I will say that, is sort of talking more about the stylistic choice. And I think one of my favorite beats early on in the movie is when we cut back to Steva and, when he sees Levin, for the first time in the movie, which, by the way, I do want to, and trust me, we're going to get to the Keira of it all. But I do have to say, Matthew Macfadyen is just as much of a cad as his character is. He's an absolute joy to watch in this movie. Yeah. I just love the way when, the doors open up and he sees Levin there and he goes, Levin! And it's just and when they go inside and talk and, and it's before it cuts to the next scene and, and Steven knows that he has to tell Levin about Bronski and he's like, we should have dinner first. It says, I forget what the name of the first place. He says, we'll meet at
L'Angleterre.
Yeah. Or you prefer the Hermitage. And it's just the way he says all those lines. It's so great. And then the next scene when they're leaving of all the stagehands moving around and and the musician, playing as like a scene transition. I know this is probably one of those early things that you struggled with, but it was just I had a stupid grin on my face watching this. And I loved just how, then it all sort of culminates in them closing, in the set where they're at the restaurant. And, and then that musical beat just ends, boom, as Steva is, having his cigar, and I just thought it was so wonderfully done. But and then the way that scene then transitions, and all the artifice is taken away, and transitions to Levin going to see Kitty, and the fact that she's positioned up there on the stage, actually sitting amongst the clouds, It's just, showing that of course is the way that Levin sees her. And, it's just, yeah. So for me, this early stuff just but it just made me fall in love with, with what the film was doing. But I think it's really interesting that the first real emotional beats of this movie belong to Levin and Kitty.
Yeah. As well as Anna and her son,
Yeah.
because that was actually another moment that really that did affect me, because it was designed as a more smaller and intimate moment. But yes, the Matthew Macfadyen, I'd say this with love, he's almost in a different movie than the rest of these characters, because he is such a, as you like, we would use the term cad. But he's such a likable cad, even though he's doing very despicable things, like the conversation when that he has with Levin in the opening restaurant, where he's talking, basically he's bemoaning the fact that his wife has kicked him out because he was unfaithful, but somehow it's her fault because she got old and he still has his
it says is, I wish I could pull up the whole speech because I won't get the whole thing, but it just, something to the effect of he's saying, this is what happens. You're a good husband. Mm-hmm. You love your wife, children arrive, and then all of a sudden, your wife gets old. And then he says something else, and it's like, meanwhile, you still have your vigor, and you find yourself a martyr to distraction by so many women.
He is delightfully full of shit, and again, the moments in that speech are like some brilliant comedic acting from Matthew Macfadyen, even though they're very cruel. Like when he's talking about his wife getting old, he's like, and her hair is thin, and her body is. Yeah, and you're just like, that's terrible to say about your wife, but we all I really hate him for it because he's so
I love the exchange where then Levin's like, I'm talking about love, you're talking about your appetite. He goes, easily confused.
Easily confused. Which again, and charm for days, but obviously one of the effects of that scene is that, in addition to making you just go like, oh Steva, you rogue, it gives you tremendous sympathy and empathy, I should say, for Levin himself, because even though these two men are friends, they really could not be more different. Levin is very humble and down to earth, and prefers the countryside to all this, all this politicking and depravity of the city. But he has come back specifically, as he says, for his angel on earth, for Kitty, and you can tell he is just hopelessly in love with her. Like, he plays that quality so well. And yes, the scene where we first lay eyes on Kitty, and she is and she literally is an angel in the clouds, as Alicia Vikander is. I was like, I actually did like that stylistic choice, where I was just like, this is how Levin sees her. And as he says, he thinks that she is unattainable. He's willing to, risk it all to try and, ask her to marry him because he's that much in love for her. But he believes it to be impossible. And the moment when she turns him down initially is crushing. And, all the more so because, that she's not doing it out of any cruelty to him. She seems to like him tremendously, perhaps even love him as a friend. She just, as we learn later, she's 18 years old and she's head over heels for, the dashing charm of one Count Vronsky at this point. Very much as I think one of the other characters says, she was taken in by a uniform. Obviously, when she gets to know Levin a little bit better, they prove to be very well matched. But this initial heartbreak is part of it. Like when she says it won't be possible for her to accept his offer, and he just kind of stands up and starts slowly backing away. Like, my heart was it shattered for him, because he's just like, you're like, this guy feels like this is the end of everything, and we see it all on Domhnall Gleeson's face. yeah, I think it's an extreme moment of the movie, but it's an essential one, and it's one of the things that really started to pull me in to the story.
I think it's an interesting thing because I think like I think in a certain way she does, you know, feel very close to him even from the outset, but there's a there's a lot to be said for, you know, how she's been brought up and what she's kind of, you know, expected to do. I'm sure her parents probably would vastly prefer someone like Vronsky over, you know, a husband who's going to take her out, you know, to the farm, and you know, and so and she's young and she's sort of, you know, and Vronsky does have that sort of, you know, way about him that, you know, you know, you can see why she's, you know, instantly enchanted by him, but he's just such a oh yeah, we're gonna get into
I mean, he's not he's not the greatest person, but he also is, you know, very clearly, like, he has his virtues, he has his qualities. There's a reason. Anna doesn't just fall for him head over heels for him because he's handsome. He, you know, he has, you know, he is a good person. He is devoted very much to her. He just was never right for Kitty, you know. And I think back to a line from Pride and Prejudice that Charlotte says to Elizabeth Bennet, "We are all fools in love," you know, very much so in this opening act, because all these characters are doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing and following their heart in ways they probably shouldn't. You know, it might not be the wisest, but heart very much rules the head here. And in a society where that is so bent on propriety and doing things the right way, as one character says later in the movie in a very revealing thing, you know, Anna's not a criminal, but she broke the rules.
That full line is, I would call on her if she had only broken the law, but she broke the rules. The thing about Vronsky and Kitty is I feel like they're both being put upon by their respective families to make a smart match. And even though there's clearly, for Vronsky, I think he, you know, he is attracted to Kitty, and you know, he's shows interest to her. I think like what ends up happening clearly demonstrates that he wasn't in love with her, and ultimately it's actually good for Kitty that, because that, I don't think that would have been like the marriage of her dreams like she thinks it will be, you know, at the time. And so I think the thing with her and Levin is that I think left to her own mind, she probably would have said yes, but I don't think she's so young that I think she doesn't even fully understand the degree to which the pressures being put on her are kind of affecting her outlook on life and who she's selecting as a partner. You know, and so it's really good that when they come together later on, they both have a different perspective on things.
Yeah, and we will talk at length about the romantic confession scene, which is the most beautiful love scene involving spelling out, you know, words with blocks that has ever been committed to to film, and it is so well acted on both sides. But in particular, you know, Kitty in this, you know, she's so young in this. Like, it really has to be mentioned that, you know, she's 18 years old, and so obviously she isn't, and she's probably lived a very sheltered life. She has not had, you know, the trials and tribulations of the romantic experience. So it's understandable that, you know, she might not leap at the first offer that's being offered to her by a good man, but is not perhaps quite as dashing as Count Vronsky. and may not have the same, societal flair. Vronsky himself, he comes from an interesting background because, while he himself is a distinguished cavalry officer, we learned that, his own mother was also kind of plagued by scandal and her own infidelities. But she, which makes it interesting that she is so, disapproves of what Vronsky ends up doing with Anna. But ultimately, it's, what makes this early dynamic so fascinating is that, Kitty very much looks up to Anna. Anna herself was once, in Kitty's place. As she said, she was 18 when she got married. She was, very much the belle of the ball at that time.
Which, if they could be having an honest conversation, Anna would actually be able to warn her against like jumping into something so soon, because her marriage to Karenina is definitely not one that's full of like on the one hand I want to say it's not full of love, but I think Karenina very much loves Anna and cares for her, but it's never been a union of like that fiery passion and I think at this point in her life, Anna's just kind of accepted that, and because she doesn't ever expect that anything else will come into her life, and then when it does, it it has a big impact.
And I mean the thing is, like, I think that Karenin, who is actually, he is a good person in many ways too, even though he is not flawless. And he does love Anna in his own way. He just, as you said, it's not very much a love born of passion. It's a love born of duty. And I think Anna does love her husband too. Clearly when she's dying, like, she thinks about him a lot. But what she has never had is what she gains with Vronsky in just a flash of what feels like a flash of lightning. She's never had the true, like, sweep off your feet, romantic, head over heels passion in her life at this point, even though she is very, distinguished and having, and respected. And that the later scene when, they're in the meadow and talking together, and she says, like, dreamily, "So this is love," It feels true because she's never had a love like this before, and Kitty hasn't either. Obviously, she has an idea of what love is, but very much, love and marriage and duty are intermingled, but they are not always, unfortunately, tied together in this society. And so there's the small match, and then there is, it very much is the head over heart or heart over head dynamic. And where the movie makes it clear that, the heart is ruling the head is in the scenes like the ball scene, where one of the things I love the most about that scene is when, because Vronsky dances with Kitty, and he does so perfunctorily, and she's a little put out by it. And then Anna is there, but she's trying not to, be taken too in by Vronsky. But then she finally does agree to dance with him when he says he'll leave if she doesn't. And then that's what they all say. He probably wouldn't have. But what I love so much about the dance sequence is we're initially wrapped up in just seeing Anna and Vronsky dancing and how beautiful it is in the camera movement. But then Kitty is a part of that scene too. And one of the things that made me realize what the scene was doing was when every time we cut back to Kitty, she's with a different partner. And they go through like 6 or 7 of them, and Anna is danced and Vronsky are still dancing, and we realize that they are dancing and dancing and dancing and dancing and dancing again and again and again, and ignoring everyone else. And that's when you start to realize that everyone's looking at them, but they can't see it because they're so caught up in each other. And that was one, again, that's the scene where I was like, okay, I get what this movie's doing, because this is great work here.
Yeah, God, and then that look of betrayal on
Kitty's face,
Kitty's face, and then the cinematography and the lighting and everything. Then when Anna stops dancing and just it's then that look back and forth between her and Kitty, and then the way she goes over and stands behind Kitty, and it's and a person we haven't mentioned yet is Dario Marianelli, the composer. His score for this, like the drama and in the scene, until ultimately, it reaches its apex when Anna goes to leave, sees herself in the mirror, and then we get that shot of the train coming at the mirror before it cuts to her actually being on the train. But the music is just a score that's very different from both Pride and Prejudice and Atonement, but like just for me equally as gorgeous and breathtaking. And that was another thing, like leading up to this movie coming out. I had gotten the soundtrack for Atonement months before that film came out, and same thing with this movie. Maybe not months, because I don't remember if the release date was staggered for this one for the UK and US premieres, but I know they definitely were for Atonement. But I still remember I did get this in the mail before the film came out, and I was just like so delighted listening to it, and like that's another like match made in heaven. Joe Wright and Dario Marianelli. I think they've continued to work together, and just his music is so gorgeous, and when I think of this movie, I can't not think of the music too.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of lovingly refer to this as the Joe Wright, Keira Knightley unofficial trilogy. Really, we could call it the unofficial Joe Wright, Keira Knightley, Dario Marianelli trilogy, because he did the scores for all three. He was Oscar nominated for all three, rightly so. He won for Atonement. And as you said, like, the work, while this work on Anna Karenina is different than the scores for Pride and Prejudice and Atonement, it's every bit as essential, all the more so because perhaps it doesn't have quite the same sweeping, scale of visuals, but it feels epic, and that is a large part due to the story.
And the music is absolutely
the
music is absolutely sweeping. Just because there's much more, this score uses more violin, and so it feels like a sweeping romantic score, and it's just amazing. And for that scene in particular, the dance scene, it's just like it's so crucial, and then there's a later moment also where it's so critical, which is when Anna goes to Vronsky, after she says too late, and sits up, and then it goes to the love scene between them, and the music is just it's breathtaking. And so okay, this is going to be the time, since we are talking about Anna and Vronsky. I'm just going to go ahead and give some time over to just talking about how utterly amazing Keira is in this film, because she has to navigate a lot of different sort of highs and lows, as Anna, especially, she goes through a section of the film where she's on her deathbed, and she's dying, and pleading for reconciliation, both between her and Karenin, and between Karenin and Vronsky, and then she's deliriously in love, and then later on, when she's feeling so isolated and turned away from society, and and so she's reeling from that, and it poisons her relationship with Vronsky. There's just so many different levels to which Keira has to go with this role, but she's just, as always, so radiant and just yeah, I just think, shocker. I think she does such an amazing job. But this was the beginning of my bitterness that she wasn't just like getting Oscar nominations left and right, because she absolutely should have gotten one for this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, chief among Keira Knightley performances in my heart will always be her performance as Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. Obviously, her work as Elizabeth Swann in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies is up there, but this is up there. This is, I think, entered probably I think it's her one of her best performances. And because like her work in Atonement is also wonderful, but she, as we've established, she's not the lead of that movie. She is actually more of a supporting character. This movie, is called Anna Karenina, and she is the lead unequivocally, and she's not just playing the lead role, she's playing one of the most famous characters in all of literature, frankly. The story of Anna Karenina is very much synonymous with tragedy for many people. But there's also other elements to it, like the joy that she feels from, when she starts to fall in love with Vronsky, and her, the fact that she doesn't want to be, she's not ashamed of it because it feels true to her. Obviously she ends up feeling shame later because of the way society treats her, but the connection that they have is very real, and it feels like something that's worth pursuing and worth fighting for. And also we see her love for her son and the care that she has for her husband, even if she doesn't have the same romantic connection that she does with Vronsky, and the affection that she has for her brother and for her sister-in-law Dolly. She plays such a wide range of emotions in this movie that she makes it all feel like it's coming from the character's true but tortured and conflicted heart. It's not an easy thing necessarily for us to get an audience to sympathize with someone who is committing adultery, and doing so, quite openly and brazenly in this society, and also doing it to a man who, frankly, well, Karenin definitely has his flaws. A lot of times, one of the ways that the movie gets around, the sympathy that fosters sympathy for the people who are committing the adulterous act is they like it. Yeah, but their partner, their husband, their wife is horrible. So obviously they're, and that's not the case here. This is a case of
and I do want to, we do want to make it clear that Karenin is very much a man of his time. Like, that's why, as you said, he's not without his flaws, but if you're looking at like the period, it's like he's I want to make sure I phrase this correctly, because there are some things he does and says that are that you don't agree with, but he is also, under the circumstances, quite forgiving of Anna, and even when he's not, he's sort of pulled back from that, and so look, through a modern lens, there's plenty of stuff to critique as far as he goes, but you do always try and put these characters in the time in which they exist, and so he's not a bad person. It's there's a lot of societal pressure on him as well, and so he says at one point in the movie is, I don't want a scandal, and like that's he's in a precarious situation just because of the position he holds as well, and which does not forgive. He's got some moments that I'm not super crazy about. He like I think the one moment that is kind of the worst for me is when he pushes his pregnant wife to the floor. It's not good. And the way that he kind of looks on sort of marriage and quote unquote sin and all that. Again, he's a man of his time. You can't that's kind of to be expected, but I think by and large he's not shown to be a quote unquote villain, which is which kind of makes it hard to, and that's why we kind of have sort of mixed feelings about Anna. We sympathize with her, but also there isn't this, we can't just point at her dastardly horrible husband and say, well, no wonder. And that makes the film complicated. And but also I think Karenina is not the quote unquote bad guy, because the society is really the villain of this movie. It's the fact that all Anna really wants to do is follow her heart, and in the modern context she would be allowed to do that, but in the society that she finds herself in, she is ostracized for that and made to feel that she's done something horribly despicable, when all she wants to do is be with someone that she truly loves. And so as so is so often the case in these Keira Knightley period pieces, it's the same thing we find in The Duchess, where where Georgiana should not be confined to a loveless marriage with a husband who, in that case, is very much an asshole. So yeah, it's just this horrible thing where you kind of just want to pluck a lot of these Keira characters in these period pieces out of their time and just say, here, go wild in a present day setting, and live your life the way you want to. But unfortunately, that's just not in the cards, and it's not the fact that she leaves Karenina for Vronsky that is her undoing. Actually, that's I think both her and Vronsky are right for wanting to be able to live their life. It's then what's then imposed on them by society that then leads to Anna's ruin, and the fact that she's not allowed to see her son, the fact that she is just completely then sort of blacklisted and and dismissed by everyone who used to be very sociable towards her and her so-called friends, and many of whom turn their back on her, and and the one guy is yelled at by his wife just for even giving her the what do you call it, the program for the play she's at, and I mean, which, by the way, you can't not recognize the voice of Moaning Myrtle. Even before they showed her face, I was like, I know who that is. And so it poisons her relationship with Vronsky, because you just can't do that to a person and and expect them to get through it unscathed. And so it's and that's why you need the Levin and Kitty story, because this is just such a horrible tragedy what befalls Anna.
I mean, it's this is one of the reasons why she's such a compelling protagonist, even if she's doing things that might be considered morally wrong by the standard. And it's because, as you said, in many respects, the society is the one that's in the wrong here. You know, the fact that she is not able, that she has to pay the price while Vronsky manages to kind of get by mostly unscathed. You know, granted, she is the one who is married and, you know, and cheating on her husband. But the thing is that in this society, it is made pretty clear that even when the man is doing the cheating, he doesn't have to pay much of a price for it. This movie opens, lest we forget, with Stiva, you know, having been cheating on his wife. And what's the first thing that we see Anna actually doing in this movie? She has to go and basically get his wife to forgive him, you know, for her sake, which is terrible because as Dolly says in a rather heartbreaking and wonderful moment from Kelly Macdonald, she's like, when, you know, she's basically like, me, like, I didn't do anything. He's the one who's cheating. But like, if she'd be the one who'd be ruined if if she didn't take him back. And Anna like makes her see that, which makes it all the more, you know, terrible that what ends up befalling her, because she has the moment with Countess Vronska on the train where Vronska is kind of like alluding to her own past affairs, and Anna's like, I don't know if I would ever have the strength to go through something like that. And we see that she puts herself through it, but ultimately to very tragic and debilitating consequences because of the times and the world she lives in.
No, that scene between Anna and Dolly is really quite chilling, actually, because she's just basically, she's appearing very nice and supportive, but she's point blank telling her, you're the one who has to get over this.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter that you haven't done anything wrong, you know, you're the one who has to forgive Stiva. Or as she puts it, or, you know, the two of you will forever remain wretched. You know, it's like, especially, you know, it's chilling, you know, then seeing then where she goes throughout the film, and the fact that, you know, it comes back around where, you know, she's gone and she's, you know, had an affair, but, you know, it just goes to show you that society does not care about the, you know, the women, you know, caught up in these things. And yeah, like you said, Vronsky is kind of, you know, he's seen as being caught up in a scandal, but nobody's shunning him. And yeah, it's just kind of not kind of, it is brutally uneven treatment. And yeah, it's just
yeah. And Cassie's making some interesting points in the chat. Doesn't seem to be the biggest fan of Vronsky, and actually seems to be more sympathetic to Karenina, which is interesting because, you know, then when we see this dynamic flipped, and Karenina is the one who is, you know, being cheated on, you know, by Anna, there's actually a similar dynamic where he basically announces to the empty theater, like, what did I do to deserve this? And, you know, and you do feel bad for him in that moment, because ultimately it's, you know, as we said, he is a deeply flawed man, but he's not a cruel man. He's not evil. Aside from the one terrible moment where he pushes Anna, he's not like physically abusive towards her. He doesn't try to, you know, kill her or Vronsky, like duel Vronsky, or when he finds this out. So in many respects, he didn't do anything. But the thing about love and the thing about the heart is that it's not like, it would be a very different story if it was Anna just seeking to escape from a terrible marriage. It's not that she was like running away from something. It's that she found something. She found something with Vronsky that she'd never had before. And so in many respects, it is not Karenina's, you know, fault, even if they didn't, like, he couldn't give her everything that she wanted, but, you know, he did what he had, was he thought was best for her. And it wasn't what she needed. and in a society where, you know, a modern society, frankly, where these two could divorce and, you know, Anya would still be able to see her son, you know, this movie would not have ended in a tragic suicide. You know, it very much is the times and the place and the customs of society. Again, the rules, as we alluded to earlier. And it is notable, you know, the fact is that, like, this movie is basically set in the pre-Bolshevik revolution of Russia. So, you know, and we get hints to that, you know, throughout the movie, even though that's an element of the novel that isn't focused on as heavily here. But it very much is the height of, like, opulence and decadence and, you know, society and of the Tsarist Russia that the people will eventually overthrow. And in many respects, we see why, you know, because the cruelty that we see afflicted on anyone, especially also, we haven't even talked about the Levin's brother, the prostitute that he considers his wife, you know, and the horrible treatment that she endures, Masha, I believe her name is. But it's because the society ultimately, as we said, it's a very sexist and outdated society, and Anna is trapped in it, and that is the core of her tragedy.
Yeah, and even someone who, you know, a character like Levin, who, you know, we're looking at as kind of, you know, the one who stands apart from, you know, all the sort of aristocracy and the, you know, Russian society. He's very, you know, like out of touch, and you know, he views his brother's wife with disdain, and you know, looks at her as less than. It really takes Kitty to kind of show him that, no, you're being an ass. And and you know, and it's great that we kind of, I love that scene of him watching, you know, her, you know, caring for his brother, and, you know, with his brother's wife there, and then we do get the sense at the end of the film, although it's not completely tied up, it's you do get the sense that he's starting to get that, and becoming more open-minded in that way. So yeah, I love Levin, but he does have a journey still to go on in unlearning some things, but in that way, Kitty is the perfect person for him. So.
Yeah, and we share your affection for Kitty in the chat, Cassie. Alicia Vikander is wonderful in this role, and she's a great character.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, this was the first time I'd ever seen her in anything, and like instantly I was like, she's gonna be an outstanding, and you know, and I was not surprised at all to see her getting more and more roles, you know, in the years following this. And then when Ex Machina came out, I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, I saw her in this and a movie that she did called A Royal Affair, which is a Danish movie with Mads Mikkelsen, and that was kind of my introduction to her. And obviously, I kind of fell head over heels. Ex Machina is probably the pinnacle of her career in terms of just being an absolutely brilliant performance. That, yes, she should have won the Oscar for that, as I think we've touched on. We've
already established she did win the Oscar for that, Jared.
But yes, but this is a smaller role. Also, I will, just because we're praising Alicia Vikander, I don't know if you've seen the movie Testament of Youth.
I have not.
It's a 2014 movie, and it stars Alicia Vikander and Kit Harington as tortured lovers, and so naturally that was very much up my alley, and I think that's a great movie too. But this is ultimately on a different.
that came in, those years when Game of Thrones was still on, and it's always weird when you see someone who's part of that ongoing series that you're watching, do like a film, in between, and it's like, no, what are you doing? You're not allowed to be anybody but Jon Snow. Hey.
Testament of Youth is better than a lot of the other movies that Kit Harington was in during his Game of Thrones.
Let's pause for a second because we've just been going and I forgot to pause for the mid roll. You're not wrong, Cassie. We talked about Dario Marianelli's music and I'm not sure if you came in before or after that, Cassie, but we were definitely waxing poetic about it. But okay, let's do the mid-roll real quick. Not much to say, although next week I'm excited and Jared is kicking himself because next time he's going to learn to maybe just keep his mouth shut. I found out that Jared has never watched Back to the Future.
Guilty.
And so we are going to be covering that film. I've only gotten him so far to commit to the first one. We'll see how that goes because it's very much a trilogy that each film picks up like immediately after the end of the last one. So I feel like I'm not going to want to wait too long in between. But if he hates the movie, then we'll stop. But I mean, my opinion is if you've never seen Back to the Future, or if you don't like Back to the Future, you're not really human.
Well, I see you have company because Cassie hasn't seen it either.
What is going on with you people? It's Back to the Future.
Yeah, I feel like we should let people peek behind the curtain and tell them how this came about, because John basically has as a cinephile and someone who loves movies very much and has a wide range of taste, there are certain movies that he feels everyone should have seen.
Okay, so we have to explain how I basically started a whole day and a half of of arguments in the Force Center Discord.
Indeed you did.
Because I think it was first announced on their live stream, but then recapped on their next podcast that they did, that that Ken and Joseph of Force Center have never seen The Lion King. And I'm sorry, but that's even more objectionable to me than the Back to the Future thing, because I got their reasons for not seeing it initially, because if they're older than I am, and if you're not of the time, if you're of that age where you're kind of moving past Disney, it happens. I went through that stage too. But here's the thing. As you grow older, you're supposed to come back around to Disney. And the fact that they evidently never had this moment of saying, I should probably check out The Lion King in the subsequent 30 freaking years. I found objectionable. And by the way, they're never going to watch this, but if they did, I say this all in good fun. I love you guys. Thank you so much for Force Center. Which, by the way, if any of you are Star Wars fans and you don't listen to Force Center, you're making a mistake, because it is the very best Star Wars podcast out there. And this all came up because they were talking about James Earl Jones, and then and their co podcast host in Jennifer Landa mentioned Mufasa as like a big, thing for them, and then they both had the look on their face like, we've never seen The Lion King. And I proceeded to object to this in the Discord, and unaware that it would spawn
so
a really long discussion. And at some point I thought maybe I was a little out of line, but then I'm like, no, they haven't seen The Lion King. What the hell?
Yeah, I mean, you just got to accept that some people don't see as many movies as you do, John, and Ken is in particular.
30 years. And by the way, no, like, here's the thing. I don't know about Joseph, but Ken even made a point to say that he has seen the live action Lion King, which for me made it an even bigger sin. Like, what? Love you, Ken. I really do. I love you, but
yeah, no. See, the thing is, this, to bring it back to why we're talking about Back to the Future. I, understanding that some people have cinematic blind spots, like for many years, my mother insisted she had never seen Star Wars. I'm like, how is that possible? I've been watching them on a loop forever. And then it turned out, no, she actually had never sat down and watched all three of them. So we finally did that together. But I, in the spirit of good fun, I was kind of like, John, this you're kind of taking this a little bit too far, man. People haven't seen movies, and I owned up to the fact that one cinematic classic that I have never sat down and watched is Back to the Future. I have actually never seen any of the three, and the reason for that is mostly just I was a little bit too young when it originally, I wasn't born when it originally came out. I knew, obviously it's one of those movies that has seeped so much into the popular culture that I know every single beat of everything that happens in the movie. So I just never felt the need. I'm like, I get that, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. I get that reference. I understand that reference. I don't need to actually sit down. I always knew I would probably like the movie, but there were just other things to watch. And it eventually became almost a point of pride of the idea that everyone has movies that they haven't seen yet. Like, what's an easy one for me to say? Like, oh yeah, I just haven't seen Back to the Future. But as soon as I raised this, John proceeded to turn his eyes of shame upon me and like, actually, now we're gonna what, how could you do this? We are gonna talk about it next week on the channel. And because I'm a good sport, and I also I actually do think I will like the movie when I see it. I wasn't avoiding it for any personal reasons. I'm like, sure. And then John's like, and then we're gonna talk about all three. And I'm like, hold up. Let's watch the first one first. But overall, what we're learning is, John is very passionate about, certain movies that have not seen. And trust me, there are other absolute cinematic classics that I have not seen. But I will, be more judicious about reviewing those in the future, unless I want our entire schedule filled up with them.
And here's the thing, I'm like, and I am most certainly a total hypocrite because I have my own blind spots. But when I'm being the judgmental one, I don't have to be concerned with my own blind spots, just other people's. Yeah, no, I'm glad you agreed to it though, because now I'm super excited about watching it next week. Yeah. 20. You think that's enough, Cassie? I'll come at everybody with the top 100 list. That'll be more to my liking. No. Except then none of you will have the time. But anyway, yeah, exactly. So anyway, that is the humorous for me, intolerable for other people story of how we're watching Back to the Future next week. But no, I'm very happy we're doing that. Yeah, I'm actually really excited because it was just a couple of years ago that they redid the films in 4K, and they look absolutely astounding. So I'm actually looking forward to revisiting then the first one, and and then we'll see.
Then we'll see. Like I said, I actually, now that we've, settled on it all in good fun, I do think I'm going to enjoy the movie, and then we'll have a good conversation about it. As I said, like, I know how important and influential it is to so many people. I just hadn't seen it, and I figured, let's. We've been looking for kind of a lighter movie to kind of. Because we've been talking about some heavy stuff in the past couple of weeks. I think this is just what the doctor ordered. Me being the doctor in this case, because I brought this up, and then John, seized upon it. So,
which I do want to say there was what I found to be an absolutely hysterical coda to the whole Force Center Discord incident, in that in an episode they did the other day where they were discussing stuff to do for their for Patreon rewards, and Joseph said something to the effect of we'll to do a thing with films that we haven't seen, since we were making some people very upset that we hadn't seen The Lion King, and by some people, I could only take the blame myself. Oh God! But
it'll be fun. I have no objections to watching Back to the Future. I just thought that the way it came about was rather kind of hilarious. That's how we settled, because we hadn't picked a stream for next week either, and then John just like, nope, we're doing this one, which again is one of the virtues of the channel. Like, normally we pick a movie that we've both seen and we both love, but every so often, we get to introduce one another to something that we love. You had shown me Hugo, and then we did the Before trilogy, all three of them, and so now it's back to me. Me to be the uncultured one who hasn't seen something, and you get to be the wise shaman leading me into the joys of Back to the Future. So,
I do feel like Back to the Future is a pretty safe choice.
I think.
No, he has found some blind spots, hence why we did the
Before trilogy.
The Before trilogy. Those were movies that I actually had always been curious about watching, just had never gotten around to it. So I was very happy we did that. Although it was so funny, because I kept remembering a reference to those movies, and I was revisiting one of the early American Dad episodes this week, and I remembered that's where the reference came from, where like Roger passes out and it looks like he's dead, and Stan goes, "Oh, great performance. Come on." And he's like, "Oh, look, we got Ethan Hawke here." And he goes, "Come on, Ethan, time to do another crappy Richard Linklater movie."
No.
I didn't think you would like that.
No, those movies are wonderful, but that show is designed to take the piss out of everything, so it's a fair target. I know that they're acquired taste, and obviously less seen movies than Back to the Future, so I think that's
well, and also, like, over in Family Guy, there was that bit where Peter goes, "I did not care for The Godfather." He goes, "It insists upon itself." So yeah, they take the crap out of everybody, but no, that did make me think of you, and it's like, Jared probably won't like that reference, but still,
it's I got a thick skin. I can take it.
Yeah. But yeah, I will say I've been seeing more and more like posts on social media about the Before trilogy, and I recognize them in a way that I did not in the past. So that is nice. Okay, so that was our very long-winded way of announcing Back to the Future for next week. And then the week after that, we'll be coming back around to the Rings of Power for our final discussion on season 2, which, like, how are we there already? I know they dropped the first 3 episodes together, but still, it feels like it just started, and
Yeah.
I am not ready for it to be over yet. So
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's going to be sad, but it's getting so good. Like you were like, where give me all of the Sauron and manipulating Celebrimbor, and then we got this past week's episode, and I'm like, oh yeah.
oh my god. Oh, poor Celebrimbor. And then when they had him walking back in, I knew the next shot from the trailer, and I was like, "Oh, we're getting the trailer shot." And sure enough, and then Bear McCreary's great moment of having the orchestra warm up as Sauron is lifting up his hands. Oh, it's so good. We're gonna have we haven't even gotten to the big battle yet. So
yeah.
So there's going to be a lot to talk about, and I did just last night watch the first episode of The Penguin, which I enjoyed immensely, and I actually forgot how much I loved that world from the Batman, and until I had the episode on, and I was like, oh shit, this is really, really good. So
I'm looking forward to. I have not seen it yet, only because I made the decision I wanted to rewatch the Batman first. So now that I've done that, I will watch the Penguin, and I anticipate I'm going to love it because that was my favorite movie of 2022, and it's only gone up in my estimation every time I've watched it. I've heard nothing about good things about the show.
Yeah, and I will say, like, and of course, like Colin Farrell is amazing as he was in the film, but like the real, for me, the standout in the episode, and I'm sure probably for the rest of the season, was I'm trying to think of how to pronounce her name, but Kristen Milioti,
maybe Kristen Milioti, yeah.
She's just outstanding and scary. Like, I don't want to be on her bad side. And it's just fantastic episode, and I think the rest of the series is going to be great. I actually loved the episode so much that I spent like the next hour and 15 minutes listening to the After the Show podcast episode. And yeah, I enjoyed that as well. So yeah, I can heartily recommend The Penguin to everybody. And yeah, so next week, Back to the Future. Week after that, Rings of Power season 2, and then we'll have more announcements for you after that. We have a couple things to decide on. We got to nail down what Halloween movie we'll be covering. So some good stuff coming up, and we'll keep you guys apprised as we figure it all out. But okay, now that we went through the long the tale of the Back to the Future stream, let's go ahead and dive back into Anna Karenina. Where did we even leave off?
We've basically been talking about how cruel society was to women, and especially women of the time. And I think that probably the best place to like pick up on that would be just focusing in specifically on the more tragic consequences of Anna and Vronsky's, love affair, because it does once it starts to spiral in terms of the societal burden, this is where the movie really earns its title as one of the world's great tragedies, because Anna is a very strong woman in many ways, but this breaks her, Yeah. And the fact is, like, we spend essentially the second half of the movie watching her being broken down until there's almost nothing left, and this once strong, vibrant woman is gone, and it goes in stages too, because, like, we get the happy scenes of her and Vronsky, frolicking in the meadows, when she's visiting the house near where the regiment is stationed, and the moment where she reveals to Vronsky that she's pregnant, that she's going to be having his child. It reminds me very much, in a way of like when Padme reveals that she's pregnant to Anakin. It's framed very similarly because they are, she's basically like, she's telling him this secret that could be dangerous for various reasons, but his reaction isn't like fear or scandal, it's joy, and in this case, he like, this is the happiest moment of his life, as Anakin had said at that time. And that's when he implores her, leave your husband. And the fact is, she does. She does eventually. She leaves him, and it seems like everything's going to work out well. They have that like absolutely beautiful love scene that you alluded to earlier, but then this is where again we see the dichotomy in how the world treats women who are wrapped up in these terrible affairs and the men, because Vronsky essentially gets to go and coast back through society, whereas Anna is shunned even when the pregnancy starts to take a bad turn and she's dying. She's essentially begging her Karenin to come and see her so that she can forgive her, and he won't do it until she's literally on her deathbed. And then to her credit, he does, forgive her. But then it makes it all the more heartbreaking when, one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the entire movie is after Karenin has forgiven Anna and taken her back, and she has delivered her daughter, and she's survived. And then she thinks Vronsky, is going to, go away at this point because, he came so close to losing her. But then she's just heartbroken, and the scene where she tells Karenin, that like where he tells her like you almost died, and then she has the heartbreaking line, but I didn't, and now I have to live with it.
Yeah.
And then she leaves him again because like in many ways she recognizes, and I think she has another line where she basically tells him about her son, Karenin's other son, like I would die for him, but I won't live like this for him. She knows that at this point she can't stay in this marriage with Karenin because it's killing her, quite literally, to not be with Vronsky. And unfortunately, Vronsky's not the antidote to solve all of her problems, but he is what she has and he is what she wants. And so she pursues it to her final actual death. Tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the most heartbreaking moment for Karenin in this movie for me is when he's like, do you want to speak to Vronsky? And she says, yes, but not to say goodbye, and that full understanding like takes a minute to sink in, and then when he just says, I can't hear. It's not, I can't hear this, or I can't hear you. It's like, he can't hear. It's like, this is not anything close to what he was expecting. He was expecting that they were going to turn the page and that they were going to be happy. But now, having survived this, she can't live without Vronsky. And it's just... Yeah, it's a moment where I think she does have his forgiveness as much as he's able to give it in that moment, and it's more that he recognizes what's going to happen next, and he's like, do you know what you want? Is what you want? And he says it would be a sin to help you destroy yourself. And because he knows exactly what awaits her if she goes through with this. And it's just this really heartbreaking moment, I think, for both of them. And Yeah, it's, and we did talk about the fact that Karenin is still a man of his time, so he's not flawless, but he does show a lot of grace to both of them. I think, and the only, but it's then when, you know, then when they go off, and for all, as far as we know, they're quite happy away from society. We don't actually see them, during that period, but when they come back uh, to St. Petersburg, they seem quite, in a good place until she finds out that she can't see her son.
Yeah.
And then that seems to really just, as it would, just completely splinter her in a way that we get hints of, earlier. But I think that that's what finally it's, and then when she tries to just kind of bury that deep down, and she says, I'm going to go out and not be ashamed, and then that further splinters her. And when she sees the degree to which uh how she's being treated, and then that's also when the seeds are planted for her thinking that she's going to lose Vronsky because of all this maneuvering that's being done outside of his control, by his own mother. And and she starts to, because because what's shown to her is that she has nothing except for Vronsky at this point. And so the thought of losing him and being left with absolutely nothing, it terrifies her, as it would, and it's just horrifying to watch all this being done to her, and watch her spiral, and yeah, it's so difficult to watch. I mean, and this is why the story is the tragedy that it is.
Yeah. I mean, Keira Knightley obviously does wonderful work throughout the movie, but like seeing the moments where Anna really starts to break down as she realizes the cost of what it is that she has given up and will have to endure, are some of her very best work of her entire career. This is like, she understood all this intellectually, but she hadn't actually experienced it. She hadn't lived it. I alluded to the scene earlier where she has the moment with Countess Vronskaya, Vronsky's mother, who had had many infidelities in her own past. And Anna asked her, like, was it love? And she's like, always. And she seems to like actually still be able to move about in society decently, but it's because she never gave up, she had her affairs, but she never like fully committed it to one like Anna is doing here. And Anna, when she says, I don't know if I would have the strength to go through what you did, in many ways, what she's going through is worse than what Countess Vronskaya endured, because, she is not just, didn't just have an affair. She's basically, fallen in love and is living openly as Vronsky's mistress, even though she knows what it will cost her, because, this is the source of joy in her life. And even though, and obviously she has other things that give her meaning, she clearly loves her son and her son loves her. And so it's a terrible sacrifice for her not to be with him. But if she could still see him, it wouldn't be as catastrophic, And one of the moments, unfortunately, where Karenin does tilt into cruelty, and although it's one that's shaded by the society, is when he steals Anna's letters to give himself the grounds for the divorce, and he turns to her and he just spits at her with real venom. As he said, he'd never hated anyone, but he started to hate her now. And he says, did you think I would let you have my son? My son. Because that is the way society sees it. Anna basically doesn't have a right to her own son, even though she carried him and, loves him more than his father, frankly. And he loves her. It's devastating, to go through that. And then when, after and to Karenin's credit, when he comes back and, forgives her, he seems to be willing to not only let her reestablish, he's willing to give her daughter that she had with Vronsky his name so that she can have the societal protections. But Anna can't give that, and when that happens, but when Anna goes back to Vronsky, that she's in danger of losing that too. And it is to Karenin's credit that at the end of the movie, he does still, it seems, take Anna and Vronsky's daughter under his protection. But as you said, Anna is just loose. She has lost her relationship with her husband. She's losing her son. She's losing, her daughter is, frankly in danger from the societal pressures that come with being a bastard in this era. She's being shunned by society. She does still seem to have some connections, like Michelle Dockery's character, Princess Miyakaya. She still seems to like Anna, and obviously she still has her brother, but it's not enough. Like, Vronsky has really become her entire world. And as you said, when that foundation starts to be chipped away, that it's completely understandable that she would essentially start losing her grip on reality and descending into, frankly, addiction, needing morphine to sleep, paranoia, and that makes it all the more tragic because that drives a wedge between her and Vronsky, even though he clearly still loves her. As he says, I think of her as my wife. And he is willing to, essentially give up a lot to be with her. But because he can't show her that unwavering devotion every second of the day, and he is not suffering the way that she is, she starts to turn on him too. And it's devastating.
Yeah, it's so sad to watch that happening, because he seems, he's wanting to give her, anything that she would ask for, but she's just become, as you said, the paranoia is setting in. So it's almost like, he doesn't know what to say at a certain point, because, it just being, because it becomes just hard to convince her that, of, his love and his, support, because she's just seeing, the worst in every possible, situation. And it's not helping that Vronsky's mother sends, the, the young princess to, deliver a message, which just puts, oil on the flames. And, but it is, it's just so horrible to watch, because he clearly does just love her so much. And you're like, if only they could have just gotten out of town sooner. But she was still going through so much that, and I don't even know if that would have solved problems. But it's just like we've been saying, she just becomes so, alienated and destroyed by, the way that society views her and treats her. And it's just, when it should really just be as simple as these two people fell in love, and, they should be allowed to be together. And she should also be allowed to see, her son, which, it brings to mind, like, another film which, is seen as a sort of quote unquote happy ending for that type of movie, but the film Carol, which I'm a huge fan of, ends in a way where those two characters get to be together, but Carol, the character Carol, played by Cate Blanchett, still, the only way she's going to be able to see her child is through supervised visitation, which, is not a quote unquote happy ending. That's bullshit. But then at least in that case, you've got a character who, at least, and again, it's horrible and it's bullshit, but she will still get to see her child, whereas Anna in this is presented with never being able to see her child, and that just utterly destroys her. And yeah, I don't know how many other ways to say it. It just really, it's infuriating just seeing the degree to which she is treated so unfairly. And again, it's like, it goes back to what we were, that moment that we've mentioned a couple times now. She isn't a criminal. If she had, I would call on her if she had only broken the law, but she broke the rules. And the fact that because she broke the rules of their society and now she's, then treated as the lowest of the low is just so monstrous.
Yeah, infuriating is a good word for it, because it is. It's archaic, and it's a good thing that we in modern society have, if we have not moved past the shame, we have at least gotten rid of some of this legalese that unfortunately strips the woman of all the rights. And because, even though Anna is not a criminal, we get language where, Karenina tells her that basically, if like one of the reasons he doesn't divorce her is like, if we divorce, you will be the guilty party and you can never legally remarry. So even if she could get divorced from Karenina, she couldn't remarry Vronsky anyway in this backwards society. So she might be in the even worse position. This way, at least her daughter still has the protection of Karenina's name, as she says. But it's hideously unfair. She is being treated like a criminal in these in this sense. And yes, as Cassie points out in the chat, some countries and societies still have archaic, horrible laws like this. We think of look at this more through like a Western, type lens. But, progress is slow, and a lot of times progress can be undone in many ways, as we're seeing in our own society. So,
yeah.
But this is like we as modern. This is meant to offend our sensibilities as modern audiences, and that is not. That is by design. The movie wants us to be on Anna's side in this part, because even if we don't think that she's making the greatest choices with this affair with Vronsky, like obviously she still deserves to see her son, and like her son is like incredibly devoted to her. She has that line where she mentions that like when he gets older and he comes to know love, he'll understand why I did what I did and can't be with him every second of the day. The moment when she comes back to see him, there's not an ounce of resentment from him towards her. He just is happy to have his mother back. And it makes it all the more heartbreaking.
And then when she says, something to the effect of, treat your father well. He's better than me. And her son says, nobody's better than you. Which is of course such a, I can identify it with that. That is such a thing for a son to say to his mother. At least if they have a good relationship. Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, as far as like society stepping backward, it should be said that this movie came out during the Obama era. So I was feeling pretty good about the fact that we weren't going to be having to worry about any substantial backward steps. Less so in our modern age, sadly. Go out and vote, everybody, please. But yeah. just and I mean it's really avoiding that. I'm really avoiding getting to the ultimate climax of all of this, which is when she, gets on the train, and even when she's sitting on the train, she's having, you know, the judgment of others, bearing her down, and then, we get that horribly haunting, but which again is part of the brilliance of the staging of this whole thing, where she's, walking, at the train station, and everybody's frozen in place, and just, when, I guess maybe we should have done a trigger warning earlier on in the stream, but for anybody who doesn't know, the story of Anna Karenina ultimately ends in her suicide, and she says, "Forgive me," and it's because she feels like she has no other options, which is so horribly sad, because there is no way that this should have ended this way for her. And again, like, the only word I can use is infuriating, because it's just
it is
so much.
It's a horrible way for her to have to die, and it was obviously, the movie foreshadows it quite pronounced. Like, trains are seen constantly throughout the movie, not only because the characters are using them to travel, but we see them at other moments too, when Anna is feeling, moments of despair, where they're like big climactic events are in place, because obviously this is all where it's leading. And we even get the scene earlier in the movie where that poor workman gets torn apart under the train wheels, which is not directly shown to it, but we see the aftermath, and it is bloody and horrifying. And knowing that is Anna's fate as well, even though the movie doesn't show us her torn body in that same way, it focuses just on her face after she dies. But we know that was a brutal and horrible way for her to choose to end her own life. And she did it only because in that moment she saw no light whatsoever. The one good thing in her life seemed to be gone. And that is a bleak and dark story. And for anyone who doesn't like that in their fiction, or is sensitive to it because of real life, concerns, we understand. Like, this is the truest form of tragedy, because it's a woman, took her own life when she, frankly, like, if society had treated her just a tiny bit better, she wouldn't have felt that she had to. And now Vronsky has lost his love, a boy has lost his mother, she has lost her own life, and people are forever changed. So it's a very bleak ending to her story. There is, that's why it's so essential that, there are some elements of light in the movie. Like, we do see that her son and her daughter will get to live on under Karenin's protection. We do have the happiness of Levin and Kitty's story as kind of the antidote to all this, as we mentioned. And thank God for it, because without that, this movie would be almost unbearably bleak. But
yeah, we've been talking a lot about about Anna's story and everything going on with her and Vronsky and Karenin. But it should be said that throughout this section of the movie, we are also getting the counterpoint of Levin and Kitty's story, and their happiness, and Kitty really kind of showing Levin that the error of his ways in certain regards, and it ends on a very uplifting note with the two of them, and so that's why this movie works. I think you said at the beginning of the stream that I think their story really is the heart of the movie.
Yeah,
and it's just, thank God for it, because just when you're in the deepest depths of depression with where Anna's story goes, you have this as working as a counterpoint to to give us hope and say, even as we're watching tragedy unfold, things to be happy about, and it's no, Cassie, I think that's totally fair because like I said, I think that their story is the one full of hope. And really, we talked about this earlier, that theirs is the romantic story that you're first invested in the opening of the film. And so I don't think that's actually I would not blame anybody for feeling that way. I think I can speak for myself. I'm probably part of the reason why I am so invested in in Anna and Bronste's story. It has a lot to do just with the fact that, all right, we'll just say it, I'm absolutely in love with Keira. So that influences that. But if I was looking from a more objective standpoint, I think I would absolutely say that that Levin and Kitty's story is really the heart and soul of the film. And so yeah, I actually don't think that either Jared or me would be in disagreement with that.
No. I mean, it's easier to root for them because also, frankly, they're very likable characters, and even though Levin, like as we mentioned, he has some flaws where he, doesn't treat his brother's wife, the former prostitute, very well initially. Like eventually he learns, and Kitty kind of shows him that. And while Kitty has her heart broken earlier in the movie by Vronsky, like she learns from it too. And when the scene I alluded to it earlier, the scene where Levin, who had basically given up on love, but then realizes he actually can't give up on Kitty when he sees her go by, and then he comes back to Moscow to see her, and then they're sitting at the table with playing the little game with the blocks, and they start to ask each other questions using that. And his
God,
did know mean never? And then she spells out, at the time I did not know. And then he, asked, she basically asked him, has his feelings changed? And he's like, no, they haven't. And even though, like, again, this is why I'm like, it's such an odd scene because they're playing this little game with the blocks, but it's also just stunningly romantic. And you can just see that the two of them actually do. Obviously, he's been in love with her from the start, but now we see that, like, that love is returned. She loves him genuinely and not as like just a fallback option. She's recognized that his love and care for her is real, and she feels it as well. And their marriage actually seems like it will be happy. It is a true love match. And the fact that she ends up, being so accepting of his brother, who had like given up everything in society for his political views, and then his relationship with this former prostitute, and the fact that she is willing to, accept them and even nurse him back to health, and we just see his love for her growing all the more. And then they have their son at the end. You're like, it makes you feel good because we want to believe in love, and this story can work. And Anna's story, unfortunately, it ends as a pretty unambiguous tragedy. It's notable that in the Joe Wright trilogy that we have mentioned, we have one movie that ends with an absolutely like sweepingly perfect, beautiful love story in Pride and Prejudice. Then we have a movie that is very tragic, but it has a kind of an undercurrent of hope to it in Atonement, even if it's complicated. This movie, our dear Keira does not get any of the fruits of her of the love. She is unfortunately destroyed by it. And that is an important side of the story to show as well. But ultimately, this movie is not a despairing movie because of Levin and Kitty's story. And it shows.
But see, this is why this needs to be a quadrilogy, because we need it to come back around to a gloriously happy ending.
Yeah, let's do. We need to send Joe Wright some happy books, some happy love stories. First for that Keira can star in.
Yeah, so yeah, no, and I think it's just by the nature of the story that like Levin and Kitty's story feels like the one that we feel most strongly for. Anna and Vronsky is such a like it's a doomed love story right from the get go, and you have these two characters who are involved in an affair, and you've got the complication of Karenin, who has his flaws but doesn't really deserve kind of the treatment that he gets throughout the film, and then ultimately like he still raises Anna's daughter as his own at the end. It's a very complicated love story that's still like I feel immense like sadness at it all, but because Levin and Kitty are just they get the happy ending, and they're the two lovers who are coming from I don't want to say a purer place because that's not really the word choice I would go for, but they're just coming from this place of this young love that it's free of now that once Vronsky leaves the picture of that threesome, it's they're kind of free to just fall in love as they will, and to have their happily ever after, but again, that's still a testament to the like they're allowed to have that relationship because of the rules that society has set up. Nobody really gets in their way. Once we get to that later portion of the film, whereas all the roadblocks are up for Anna and Vronsky, and it's just so once again, it's just like damn that horrible aristocracy, and it's it says a lot that ultimately Levin and Kitty get to have their a great love because they get away from all of that.
Yeah.
And actually, Vronsky and Anna become doomed because they return to that.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, Vronsky really kind of summarizes it all in a single exchange that he and Anna have, where when he's making it clear that he wants this with her, he's pursuing her, and she has the line where she says, "If you have any thought for me, you will give me back my peace." And Vronsky responds, "There can be no peace for us, only misery and the greatest happiness." And doesn't that just about say it all about their relationship? Because they did have sincere happiness together. The scene where they're together in the meadow, like, that is an unambiguously happy scene. It feels like the rest of the world and their troubles are very far away. But obviously, there is misery aplenty that comes as a consequence of this very doomed love affair, as you said. Cassie had mentioned in the chat, if you're looking for like happy, optimistic, stories, classic Russian literature isn't always the best place to find it. They like their tragedies. But the fact is that this story is so much more than the tragedy. It's, complex. There is happiness as well. There is, the triumph of Kitty and Levin's relationship. There's comedy as well. Obviously, one of the things that kind of got condensed in this very long book that was adapted down to a 2-hour movie is the whole social undercurrent about the rising, the rise of the working class that will eventually lead to the overthrow of the Tsarist regime in like 20 or 30 years after the events of this movie. And we see hints of that, like, because we see like Levin working the field as well. but he has that exchange with the with his one of his workers where he is basically I think he asks like they're talking about what's right in terms of the heart, and Levin asks him like how do we know what's rightly, and his employee responds, just by knowing it, how else? And Levin responds, but I believe in reason. And the worker kind of returns, reason? Was it reason that made you choose your wife? And, as another character in another franchise, we once said, we don't get to choose who we love. And Anna and Vronsky, the love that they had, it happened to them, and it was a choice for them to pursue it. But the instant spark of attraction that they felt for each other, like they didn't know that it would destroy their lives like this. They had an idea, but ultimately they chose to pursue it because in many ways to them it was worth it. And there is beauty in that, even if it is tragic in so many ways.
I will say that I think one of the most striking moments for me is the fact that with that moment when they first meet and when they initially walk they walk past one another and then they both like turn a second later and look right at each other. I love that idea of lightning striking like that, and that when you see that person, you just kind of know, and even though it's obviously does not work out well for them, it is sort of undeniable. And then later on when there's that moment of her looking down at him when he comes to call for Kitty, and she's just kind of looking down at him from the shadows, and then he looks up. It's just pure magnetism, and so and then later on when he says dance with me, and she says I'm not used to being spoken to that way from a man. I meant once at a railway station. And he's like calling bullshit on that. He's like, oh, come on. There's more going on here than that.
Yeah. No, very, very, very clearly. And praising the dance scene again, like that's in many ways like the heart of Anna and Vronsky's story, because the passion that they have there in that scene is very, very apparent. And we have gushed a lot about Keira Knightley, as we are wont to do, being the Knights of Keira and all. I do think that this is a great performance by Aaron Taylor Johnson as well. Like, he's an actor who I've not always thought had loved all of his performances, but I think he is very good in this. Playing in almost the character on the page is basically just almost impossibly dashing, and it's hard for real human actors to pull that off. But I get why Anna falls for him immediately, and why he falls for her is very apparent. But there's more to it than just simple physical attraction. There is a real connection and passion here that the two actors bring out in their performance. I love the scene in the meadow, as I mentioned, where they're actually ambiguously happy, and honest, like, is this love? And this is love, like I'd never realized it before. And Vronsky telling her, you can't ask why about love, it just happens. And it happened to these two characters. And the time that they had together was, unfortunately brief and marred with tragedy, but it was not. It is not something that was at its core wrong. The love, that is, the societal norms are kind of make it more complicated, but the fact that these two characters fell in love is not necessarily something that we should feel was a mistake. In many ways, it just happened, and that they chose to pursue it is a credit to them in many ways. But the consequences were severe because the world isn't fair.
Yeah, we talked a lot earlier about the dance scene. Like, you want to know what got me invested in their story, and it's that dance scene. It's so magnetic, and yeah, it's I just, I spoke earlier about the fact that I was basically holding my breath in for that whole scene, and oh god, just so good. I will say that the only if there was anything that sort of held me back on Aaron Taylor Johnson's, Vronsky, it's the fact that I had been made aware that in a previous version of Anna Karenina that Vronsky was played by Sean Bean. And and so part of me was just like, I should have a Sean Bean Vronsky. And that's not fair to Aaron Taylor Johnson. I think he does a fine job in the movie. But there's that, and also the fact that the only thing I knew him from prior to this was Kick-Ass. Which,
very different.
Yeah. But but yeah, no, I actually think he did a really good job. It's just the fact that, yeah, I think it does a great he does a great job, because like he is playing someone who's very dashing, but also like too dashing, and then you lose, you don't care that much for Karenin's plight, and it's like, so it's a delicate balance so that you still feel sorry for Karenin, but also you don't want to damn Anna and Vronsky either. So it's it's in that way, actually, it reminds me quite a bit of that sort of dynamic you're going for in another thing I'm quite a big fan of, which is Outlander. The first season of that show, especially, where you've got the dynamic between Claire, Jamie, and her husband Frank, and that's like, Frank being played by the great Tobias Menzies, and like you get that eventually she's going to be going with Jamie, but Tobias Menzies Frank is such a likable character, and so if hopefully at some point we'll get to some streams about that show, and we can talk about it, because I think that's actually one of my favorite love stories, just for that reason of you kind of feel for everybody in that situation. But yeah, trying to think if there's other stuff. Like I just want to say again, like how actually now I'm just saying fragments of sentences, but you'll see where I'm going eventually. I should take a minute to really praise Kelly Macdonald as Dolly, because I was about to launch into praising Matthew MacFadyen again, but it probably is good to pay some attention to her performance as Dolly, especially like we were talking about that scene between her and Anna. I really, like you said, I love that moment when she says, "But I haven't done anything," and it's just like, and that perfectly captures the horrible society that these characters find themselves in, where it's up to the wife to forgive the husband, and she's so good. It's a smaller part, but like Kelly Macdonald is never not absolutely fantastic in anything that she does. I'm trying to think if the first thing I saw her in was No Country for Old Men. But she was fantastic in that, and then obviously in Boardwalk Empire, like she was absolutely amazing in that, and then she had a bit part in the last Harry Potter. as well as a slew of other things. I just have always been incredibly impressed by her, and she's great in this.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, like as you said, it's a smaller role, but it's an essential role because she offers yet another perspective on the society, especially as we see she does end up forgiving her husband, Steva, Anna's brother. And even though it's made clear that he has not changed his ways, she seems to come to a level of accepting of it, and she does seem to still love him. She has that conversation with Kitty where, you know, she says...
But the best... But the best, yeah, she's accepted it, but also there's that great moment between her and Anna when Anna says, "Yeah, you don't think I'm horrible for what I've done," and she's like, "No, I wish I could have done it myself, but nobody asked me."
Yeah, which is sad, but it's also you know, like Kelly Macdonald says it with such charm. But the Steva and Anna are an interesting.
Oh yeah, no, that's actually, I forgot to mention my favorite moment of theirs, which really goes to, like, again, it reinforces this whole idea, like it's never the man's fault. It's earlier on in the film, so Anna has yet to go through all this stuff, but I just love the moment where she gets off the train. You know, she goes, Steva, and they run towards one another, and he goes, Anna, and she looked at me and she's like, you don't look ashamed. And he's like, oh, I am. I really am. And it's like, and so, like, she's not even really mad at him because this is her brother, and she just accepts that that's who he is. And she's just so excited to see him. But it is sort of, it's reinforcing this whole societal thing that the man, he has nothing to apologize for, you know, and so on the one hand it's a fun beat between these characters, but on the other hand it really speaks to everything that's wrong with this society. But I just love that because it really showcases their dynamic in this movie, which is so different from Pride and Prejudice.
No, I mean, I always find that incredibly. But you know, again, acting, you know, and it's hard. It can be hard sometimes to separate characters from their most iconic roles, but you know, the great actors will do it. And like, it will never not be funny to me that you know we had Joe Wright and Keira Knightley playing like the epitome of love of beautiful lovers in Pride and Prejudice, and then in this movie they are like they're playing brother and sister, and they have a completely different dynamic, but it's also great.
And like, I can't help but laugh a little bit now in retrospect too, because of that interview with Matthew MacFadyen where he thinks was miscast as Darcy because he thinks he's not dishy enough, and so that just makes me think that he probably felt much more at ease playing Oblonsky because he probably sees this as more of a character in his, wheelhouse, but he's wrong because he was a Darcy for the ages. And and if I ever have the chance to interview him for some reason, I'm going to set the record straight on that.
Sometimes actors can't see the full picture, or directors, they see our comments on Denis Villeneuve saying like maybe it was a mistake to make Blade Runner 2049. We're like, no. and Matthew MacFadyen saying he wasn't dishy enough as Mr. Darcy, and I'm like, I think the internet will disagree with you, sir, if you've ever ventured onto it. Obviously, people will champion Colin Firth, but Matthew MacFadyen did a great job as Darcy as well, and Keira Knightley is the superior Elizabeth Bennet, as great as the other as.
No, I think here's the thing, and we're both big fans of the '95 Pride and Prejudice, but but I feel like we're also very big proponents on setting the record straight that the 2005 is not some lesser version or whatever it is. For us, it's the version, and and then each version has their big, you know, uh, you know, supporters, but I think the internet culture has made it clear that there are a hell of a lot of people who feel very passionately about the 2005 film as we do. And I will say that it is still one of my points of contention with the Barbie movie, that they used the 95 Pride and Prejudice instead of the 2005, which I think the 2005 would have been a more fitting reference for for modern audiences, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll set
like
the
how
record.
I love how I veered off just now to champion my preferred version of Pride and Prejudice.
Well, I mean, we were talking about Keira Knightley and Matthew MacFadyen, so it made sense. We do love the 1995 Pride and Prejudice as well. We may end up talking about it on this channel, in fact. And Jennifer Ely and Colin Firth are wonderful, but we are on record that the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice is one of the touchstone movies for us. It's one of the reasons that it was one of the initial things that, like, why we're friends and why we have this channel together is we were connected over Game of Thrones, and when we both realized that we loved that movie, it's one of the things that really kind of set the course, and it also was my introduction to the story. So I will always love it, and it also introduced me to Joe Wright films, because that was his debut, and he's given great work with Atonement and Anna Karenina as well. So it was a start of many good things.
Yeah. So just a couple other things. There's some actors that we mentioned in passing, but I do like. She doesn't have that much to do in the film other than kind of, show up occasionally to be a a thorn in Vronsky's side, but playing his mother as the great Olivia Williams. Who I always want to single out because she's just extraordinary. I think the first thing I ever saw her in, like I imagine this was the case for a lot of people, was The Sixth Sense. I remember, and I've known of her ever since then. And as a matter of fact, she just she voiced the Entwife in Rings of Power, which I was very excited about. And then, you mentioned Michelle Dockery earlier. I feel like she plays one of the good people in this movie because she remains very supportive of Anna, throughout the film. And
I'll shout out Ruth Wilson as well, because I've been rewatching his Dark Materials, as I said, and she plays a very evil character on that show. And here she's just much more of like a kind of she's got a fun attitude as a Aaron Taylor Johnson as Vronsky's cousin, Betsy, I believe. She kind of reminds me a little bit of the Kelly Riley performance in Pride and Prejudice that I love so much. But Michelle Dockery, yes, as I mentioned, I'm a big Lady Mary devotee, and so I was happy to see her play a character who stays by Anna's side and seems to recognize that she is being treated.
And then also another small role as the Princess Sorokina. We have Cara Delevingne, who this was like one of the earliest times that I saw her in anything. I'm not even sure if she has any lines in the movie. But many more things to come from after she did this.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely one of those actresses that I recognized upon repeat viewings of this movie. And we mentioned before that this movie had just an absurd amount of of appearances by great actors and actresses. We mentioned earlier, Cassie, you weren't here, but we mentioned that quick blink and you'll miss it appearance from John Bradley. Samuel Tarly himself. Yeah. He's seen through, one shot through a window and then never seen again.
Yeah, and although he is a centerpiece of a kind of a funny, comedic beat, because like when Vronsky shows up at the train station and sees one of his colleagues there, and he's basically like, "Yeah, I've been assigned to these Russian, to these Austro-Hungarian like Duke and Duchess here on their honeymoon. I've got them for 4 days," and Vronsky's just like, You'll get through it, buddy. You'll get through it. So perhaps John Bradley and his wife took a few nights out on the town and then put that poor Russian soldier through his paces.
Oh God. But like we said, blink and you'll miss it. Because I said before that this movie came out a year after Game of Thrones started, so I absolutely recognized him when I saw him in the film. But I was like, it was so funny because I was like, "Oh, cool, John Bradley's in this." Oh wait, no, he's not. He's just one shot and he's done. But yeah, no. But this is just an absolutely beautiful film, and I do feel like it's the underappreciated film in the Joe Wright, Keira Knightley trilogy. But I've always loved it, and I will say I'm still waiting less patiently as time goes on for a great big coffee table style book on the making of these three films. Which there's never been anything like that for any one of these three movies, and I'm a bit annoyed by that.
One of those movies has a big anniversary coming next year. That seemed like it would be a prime time for something like that. Yeah,
the thing like I'm hoping for at the very least is that film, if not the others, gets a 4K remastering and next year. I've been waiting patiently for that for a number of years, but yeah, a book would be nice too.
Yeah, as with a theatrical re-release, because if that happens, I'm definitely partaking in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I'm not even ruling out the possibility that you and I find a way to get together for a joined screening of that movie if they put it back out in the theaters, and we can make that a big part of our anniversary stream that we'll do of the film. But
John Webster film field trip.
Yeah. Yeah, so anything else about the movie that you wanted to mention?
No, just that, as I mentioned, while I initially had a barrier to entry with this movie with the style, ultimately I did come to sincerely love it, and it has only gone up in my estimation with subsequent viewings. Like when I rewatched it this weekend for this stream, I just found myself completely captivated by the story, and especially certain sequences like the dance sequence that we have praised at length. Also, the scene from this scene where with the fireworks and the beautiful shot of Keira as Anna looking up towards the sky. I just found it so moving. Ultimately, as I said, it's the third of the three Joe Wright Keira collaborations for me, with Pride and Prejudice being the number one, and then Atonement 2, and then this one. But any director would be lucky to have three films of this immense quality on their resume. And frankly, I don't know if Joe Wright's matched the three works that he has that he did with Keira since, even though he remains a very good director. So maybe he should work with her again, and we will expand the trilogy to a quadrilogy, as you said. But ultimately, this is a movie that, while style is in abundance in this film, it is not a case of style over substance. The story is the main thing for me, in all its beauty and tragedy. It is based on one of the most famous works of literature ever written, and condensing an 864-page dense Russian novel down to a 2-hour and 15-minute movie that, tells the full story and feels beautiful and of a piece is one hell of an accomplishment. So my hat's off to Joe Wright and Keira Knightley for this collaboration. I think they earned their keep with this one, and I'm glad that I was able to keep my heart open to it, so I could come to love it as I do.
Yeah, and I will just say, Cassie, it's like I don't agree with you about the story being being sort of weaker, but that doesn't mean I don't sympathize with that point of view, because that was a conversation being had when the film came out. I think there were certainly a number of critics who felt like the style was made more of an impression than the story. For me, it's all bound up together. Maybe because I haven't read the book before or seen other adaptations. But whatever the reason, for me, the story is just, I felt really compelling, but yeah, but I don't want that to imply that, that I don't understand and support, your take on it. And that's a thing, like, certain things aren't going to be to everybody's taste. But yeah, no. But yeah, it's I liked that we got to showcase that even though Jared and I ultimately are in agreement on the film, we did kind of start from different places. You missed the beginning of the stream where Jared got to talk about how initially off-putting the style of the movie was to him, and so it was fun to go through that conversation as well. It's what makes ultimately what makes the whole experience of film so intriguing, is that everybody has a different reaction. And yeah, so, but I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about this one, because we talked about Pride and Prejudice a long time ago. We just recently talked about Atonement, and so it felt only fitting to make sure we got to the third film, and because it's unofficial in every way, but I really do view these movies as a trilogy. So and I hope they're released as such in like a box set when the 4K releases do come. Yeah. Oh, it was fine.
It wasn't really a disagreement. It was more just me explaining that I had. I initially did not respond to the setting and the style of the movie, where John very much did, but I was just explaining why and how I ultimately overcame it. So.
I love, though, that's what constitutes an argument for us. Although that's probably why I also do keep putting off the Star Wars sequel trilogy discussion.
It won't be an argument. It'll be a celebration. We just have different.
We're gonna be fine. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that discussion, but as I've said before, there are a lot of things in Rise of Skywalker that I love. It just doesn't all come together, as a whole, where I'm, it's just there's a lot of stuff that I love, and then there's a lot of stuff that I have issues with.
We've talked around those specifics, but we'll get to it. Whereas it's my single favorite thing that Disney has put out with the entire time they've had Star Wars, and it's my second favorite Star Wars movie ever, and I love it to my core. So it's just different tastes.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry, but see, that's what's going to make me testy. The favorite thing that Disney has released, the thing, because
it's
then
the truth.
I'm going to present.
Honest to God truth.
Okay, all I'm going to say is I'm presenting you with Siege of Mandalore, and
that is the only thing that I would put on the same level. So,
okay.
So if we want to have that discussion, I'm happy to do that. They can be co-favorites.
In any case, I think that'll be the only. That's why I want to make sure that I certainly wouldn't want to do one stream that was like taking in the entire trilogy, because I feel like we're going to have very different discussions for each of those films, and the one that I'm looking forward to the most, honestly, is the Force Awakens stream, because I just feel like that's going to be a love fest. Because I just have so many things that I love about that one. So, but we'll get there in due course. Let me see. No, we can always agree on Poe Dameron. in all of those movies. No, like I will say, the one thing that you won't hear me complaining about with even Rise of Skywalker is the characters. Like my favorite thing to come out of all of those films is absolutely, like, first and foremost, Rey, as a character, and Daisy Ridley just does an amazing job in all three of those films. And then you know what? Screw it. I've been pretty well behaved, surprisingly, this stream, but I'll just say it. Especially Rise of Skywalker, Rey has those muscles working for her. I'm just putting that out there. Oh yeah, that was a thing that happened.
And it is. She put in the work, as they say. I'm actually surprised at how well behaved we were and not gushing about how beautiful Keira is in this movie, because frankly, she's rarely looked better in any movie. And it is. I believe I used the term ravishing earlier. Definitely stand by that one.
Well, we just alluded to this scene with the fireworks. When she's staring up and her eyes are just like, oh my God, she just outrageously breathtaking and beautiful. And there's a moment after the dance with Vronsky where then it cuts to her being on the train, and she takes out that little knife just to cool her face down. And I'm like, yeah, I feel that. No, like I'll just go ahead and yeah, exactly. And gee, I wonder what the connection there is. Going to be outrageously gorgeous British women. But no. Yeah, I'll just get it out there now, since I was well behaved throughout the stream. Like, oh my God, Keira is just gorgeous throughout this movie. And that whole scene, really, where we mentioned the scene with the fireworks, just that sort of the dance that she does with Vronsky that's not actually a dance, but it's like the staging of how she moves around with him as they're having a conversation. There's just something so intoxicating and sexy about that whole scene. And yeah, no. She's just, yeah. There are no words. That's you know, it's one of the great things about going back to watching all of these movies that she does is it is sort of this wonderful, I always call it coming up for air, because I just get to bask in, you know, in how breathtakingly beautiful she is. I used to feel that way about every time I went to the movies to see one of her films. It's like, oh, finally, I get to I get to just admire Keira for another 2 hours on the big screen. So, yeah. Oh, okay.
We had to get it out there. And as Cassie points out in the chat, the entire character is meant to be the embodiment of sensuality. She does that, and she does it very, very well.
Yeah. Which is why I am so like, you'll notice me getting irritable during the times when we have to go a long stretch without any new Keira material, either on the big screen or on television. I am waiting and waiting for that Black Doves trailer from Netflix. It's like, God damn it, when are we getting it? Oh, it'll come sooner or later. But yeah, so okay. I think I got enough out there.
All right. Yeah, but we can probably wrap this one up before we hit the 3-hour mark, I think. But it's we had to get the Keira appreciation in there, or we would not be doing our jobs as the Knights of Keira. So
yeah.
Yep. There we go. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Oh, I really hope there's an alternate reality out there where you know, her and I are together. Okay, I said
okay,
it. And on the note of going too far, we're gonna pull back and we'll talk about next next week. We're talking about Back to the Future next week, and then the week after that, we'll be wrapping up our Rings of Power season 2 coverage. Which again, I am going to express how much I can't believe it's we're getting to the end of that show, but we still have 2 more weeks, and yeah. So and then we're going to cook up some stuff for after that. We're deciding on what our Halloween stream is going to be. We haven't actually discussed any exact possibilities for that, but part of me is thinking that maybe we do go ahead and revisit, because you and I haven't done it together, but do a stream about the original Alien as a possibility. And then if we do Aliens, make sure that we bring, you know, at least Laura on for that, and maybe Blue Lemons as well. You know, if we can get those two to commit, but yeah, or maybe we'll do something totally different, and we'll do something more traditionally Halloweenish. But we'll see.
We'll see. Stay tuned.
But yeah. Aside from that, we're gonna work on coming up with a schedule for what's after that. We have talked about doing a stream about Interstellar for its anniversary, because you know we love our Christopher Nolan streams, and I can tell you right now, Interstellar will be a 4-hour stream. Like, there's no getting around that. There is so much in that movie that I absolutely adore, and I feel like there's so much to talk about, you know, in terms of thematics and technical wizardry, and it's going to be one of those streams. So,
yeah.
But yeah, then that's it for now. And then when we come up with the other stuff, I can broadcast something later on down the line, which we both agreed we've nailed down, which is going to be on December, what did we say, 15th? The 15th, we're going to be covering The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, which will be coming out that weekend. And regardless, like, no, we don't have to see it first. We know we're going to be talking about it, and I just can't wait. I've been anticipating this for a long time, but when that trailer came out and we got to actually see, what this film is going to look like, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be great. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So that's what we got coming up for the holiday season.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we sign off, Jared?
Nope. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about this movie, and the Knights of Keira have once again paid tribute to our Lady Liege, and we will be doing it again sooner rather than later. We just have to find the next Wright project, which may end up being King Arthur, but we will see.
Oh, we'll see. I'm actually sorry to hear that, Cassie, because I know you were kind of worried about what the animation was going to look like for a while, but I actually thought that trailer would have dissuaded your fears, but maybe not. I think it looks beautiful, so I'm very much looking forward to it, but I don't know. Hopefully, once you get to see the whole film, you'll enjoy it, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to it because I'm glad it's being done in 2D animation, and I may have taken a quick look at the Japanese version of the trailer, but I don't quite remember. If I have, I only watched it once. I've seen the U.S. trailer a lot more.
It confirms the presence of a character who is not in the U.S. version of the trailer.
Yeah, I do remember that being a thing. But I don't know. We'll see. We're still a couple months away from it. So I'm just excited that I get to go in the theater and see, and see more Middle Earth, And I will say that, I can't speak to how like the 3D elements are going to integrate with the 2D, but it looked predominantly 2D to me. So I very much like that. My fear was that it was going to be entirely like CG as opposed to hand drawn. So the fact that it's at least predominantly 2D just makes it so that I'm like, I can fully look forward to it now. So, but I don't know. We'll see. In any case, I can't wait for the movie to come out, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I have other feelings related to other Middle Earth movie announcements that we may get into at a later date, but those are a bit more complicated. But yeah, no. But in the short term, we'll be talking about the Rings of Power in a couple weeks, and yeah. And so come back next week for Jared getting to see Back to the Future for finally, and yeah, I can't wait to dive back into an old favorite. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's about it. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I can drag this out with, but apparently not. But Anyway, for everybody who tuned into this, I hope you have a lovely night, and thank you, Cassie, for joining us in the chat, and we will see you guys next week. Until then, there's no catchphrase for.
No,
for
I was looking for one, and I was like, this is not a movie that lends itself to snappy, ending lines. So I will borrow one from another franchise, and I will just pay tribute to the reason for the stream, the Knights of Keira, and say, gentlemen, hoist the colors.
And looking ahead to next week, I would just say, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.